welcome to London, man.
Thank you, man. Glad to be here.
First time?
First time.
Can't believe it's your first time in London.
Yeah, it's been almost 2 weeks. Had a great time.
That's a long time in London.
Yeah, so this was like, I did Prague and I did Oslo. And then London was the beginning of my adult vacation. So it's been nice.
What have you done? Tell me what you've done in London.
Let's see. I've done a lot of the tourist sightseeing stuff. So we walked down to the Tower Bridge, saw that. Did not do the London Eye. Also took the train to Paris for 3 days. So did a bunch of stuff there in the middle of it. And basically had a lot of nice dinners and been in a couple of pubs. And
have you got wasted at a pub?
No, I haven't been wasted on this trip. But it's been fun. London reminds me of New York without the things about New York that I don't like, which is like the extreme aggressiveness and the uncleanliness. London seems to be a little bit cleaner. People are a little bit nicer, more chipper, not so aggressive.
Are you saying we're a civilized society?
It's kind of like a civilized New York, I guess. And the city's super walkable, which is, I think, I read a study a long time ago that walkability is like the primary factor in determining your happiness and living in a place. And so I don't know, people seem to be happy here. The service has been great, like the bellman, the waiters, the waitresses, everyone at every hotel I've been in, it's been very service oriented. So I've had a really good time.
Good, man. I'm glad to hear. I am a big fan of London. I think it's the best city in the world, and I know I'm biased, but I think it's got everything you need, and I think the people are great.
A lot of my American friends say the same thing, by the way, which is why I was anxious to come here. Many of my American friends that have traveled extensively internationally say London's their favorite international city, and I think I see why.
And look, listen, I love New York, but for different reasons, and I love Los Angeles. I love Paris, I love Berlin. I've still got to tick off places like Singapore and Sydney, hopefully later in the year. But I am a big fan of London because it's a very multicultural city. It's very accepting. It's very civilized. It's got growing issues, sadly, and we'll probably get into that because there's definitely growing societal issues. But I'm pro London, and I love it when people come here and experience it. How does it? Okay, so now you've seen it. Because I think, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but a lot of Americans don't travel outside America. Doing the pod, I've met a lot of people who literally have not left America. Right. And I think you have to see the world to understand the world a little bit more. How would you compare and contrast London to, say, I know America as a whole is a tough one, but generally speaking?
So this is not my first trip to Europe. I've been to Europe several times. First time to London though. And my big takeaway the first time I traveled to Europe was America is like an adolescent culture, right? We're less than 250 years old. You see it in the architecture everywhere. Like we just don't have things that are as ancient as you guys have in Europe. And with that comes a lot more history, a lot more story. And I guess just a more refined culture by virtue of being older, right? If culture is like a collective organism, like we often talk about it, then the European culture would just be an older, wiser organism, whereas America is kind of still in its late teens, maybe. I'm not really sure.
The petulant child.
Maybe early 20s, which has some advantages, right? Like we're bold, we're all of these things, we're innovative, experimental, but maybe a bit reckless, a bit immature, a little bit lacking in wisdom. And when I picked that up, the big perspective gain I had in coming to Europe was this whole, like, there's a whole other world, right? Like I've been in America my whole life thinking this was it. And it's kind of like that feeling of stepping off the set of the Truman Show and being like, oh, there's entire other worlds out here. And when I went to Asia, that's another whole culture shock. I mean, that's
unbelievable.
An alien world, basically.
Have you been to India?
Not yet.
Dude, you've got to go to India.
Yeah, I've heard.
Mumbai was one of the biggest culture shocks of my life.
Yeah.
It's just mental. This city's unbelievable. I loved it. I'm desperate to go back. I want to take my kids. But yeah, no, I sometimes, like, the kind of things we debate or we clash on. We have things we disagree with and can remain friends over. But sometimes when I have these disagreements with people, I almost think, well, I've spent a lot of time in your country. I've been to the US like 70, 80 times. Like, I definitely understand the US better than you understand the UK. I wish people would travel more and see and understand why we're different. I'm not saying we should be the same, but there are cultural differences. We don't have this kind of like these such extremes.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of meet in the middle more and try and figure stuff out, which I think has its negatives as well.
Sure. Someone actually, the culture of extremes, I forget who described that, but they were talking about how America is very much that, right? It's like we have the fittest and the fattest. We have the richest and we have the poorest.
Yeah.
We have some of the nicest restaurants and some of the most disgusting places. Like, it very much is a polarized land. And maybe there are advantages to that where you're trying to, again, be creative or innovative. You need to have these extremes. But for a long-term sustainable place, you would expect it to have less polarity and a little bit more centeredness, perhaps.
Well, it feels like it's breaking. Have you listened to Balaji and Marty Bent?
I haven't, no.
Man, it's worth giving that 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
It's my favorite podcast of the year so far.
I got a flight tomorrow, so I'll listen to it.
It's so good. I don't agree with everything Balaji says. I'm keeping notes because I'm going to interview him because there's some things I want to challenge him on. But there's so many key points he hits on that are really insane. There was one point he said, only 4% of Democrats marry Republicans. And he said it's this divide now. It's almost like the Sunnis and the Shiites.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, to me, it's a culture that's breaking. Well, it's two cultures really.
Yeah.
That are trying to survive together. And I don't know if it just needs to fully break or this is a good thing.
I don't know the answer to that either. You've seen these data visuals though, where it shows like red and blue. It shows the divide on issues year over year.
Yeah.
And it shows it just getting wider and wider apart over time, right?
It's like Moses parting the sea now.
Yeah, exactly. But it's very much my hypothesis is like a post-1971 thing. Is once you start to eviscerate the middle class through money printing, right? You develop these political tensions between rich and poor, obviously, because the rich are getting much richer, the poor are getting much poorer. That manifests itself as political tensions, right? As people are voting their interests, essentially. And so I think that you've got money upstream from culture, or you could say economics upstream from culture and culture upstream from politics. So I think a lot of that divisiveness that's going on in the U.S. is a direct consequence of the U.S. dollar hegemony, that we've been destroying our middle class more aggressively than ever in the past few years. And you're seeing that those tensions erupt into political shitstorms effectively.
That is happening here as well now.
Mm-hmm, of course. It has to happen everywhere where it's taking place.
The middle class is getting destroyed, middle class businesses. I mean, families I know with two incomes who you think, life should be pretty comfortable and decent, are in debt.
Sure.
With two solid incomes. And the massive inflation, massive increase of energy prices we've had over the last year, it's been really particularly bad here.
Yeah.
I've just seen a destruction of disposable income.
Yeah.
And it's not good.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that it's strong property rights that allow a middle class to be built up. And the middle class is obviously the bulwark to the entire society. Like, as long as it's flourishing and healthy and prospering, then it sort of is the glue that holds together the hierarchy. But when you start violating property, right, through printing money, excessive regulation, taxation, whatever it may be, you're gutting the middle class. You're literally destroying the center of mass of society itself.
I think it was Dominic Frisby. You know Dominic, don't you?
Of course.
Yeah. When we made a film on inflation, I can't remember, because I don't know the facts. I think he said it was Stalin who said, to destroy a society, you destroy the middle class.
Of course, yeah.
And I don't know if it's coordinated evilness or it's just the incentives of the system just lead to it. And I think I kind of sway to the latter.
I agree.
I just think it's like a system of poor incentives that ultimately lead to the destruction of the middle class. And like I say, we are seeing it here.
Mm.
I don't see an easy way back. I certainly see a potential for massive rounds of further increasing in money printing.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see a road back from this.
Well, I don't really either, other than the return to sound money.
There we go, man.
Takes a long time. Ed Dowd calls it a meta fraud, which I really like that that description, because it's not a few guys sitting in a room puffing cigars saying, what are we going to do to destroy the world, right? It's this emergent process of bad incentives leading to bad outcomes, and then people typically try to double down. And that obviously, as you're destroying the middle class, you end up with this huge cohort of poor people that, especially through a democratic mechanism, are trying to vote themselves money. And when you get into that process of different people trying to vote themselves money, so using the political apparatus to enrich themselves, that's something that's not productive, right? You're not creating anything. You're moving away from the positive sum game of people trading and producing new things and more wealth to the zero sum game of like, my win is your loss. And so that seems to be this major dissolution that occurs with moving off of sound money. As you break the money, trade starts to not work so well, capital starts to get misallocated. The pie is basically shrinking or not growing as fast. So people devolve into more of a zero-sum mentality where it's like, I need to take from you to gain, rather than both of us gaining through mutual trade.
Is there a nuance to that? Because you said people trying to vote themselves money, which I completely agree. I don't think it matters which political party. They're all trying to vote themselves money.
Of course.
But when you say vote themselves rich, who are the people voting themselves rich? Because certainly here, the Labour Party would be campaigning on supporting the people who struggle most in society. And so these people aren't trying to vote themselves rich. They're trying to vote themselves survival.
Yeah, I'm not saying vote yourself rich. I'm just saying vote what is the vote, right? I'm casting a ballot saying, I want this political leader who presumably represents my interests to go and leverage the political apparatus, which is not creating anything, right? It's an organization that is sustaining itself on theft from citizens through inflation and taxation. So I want part of the stolen proceeds to go to me, whether I'm the poor labor class or I'm the upper class in the UK. We have, basically Democrats in the US, which support the poor, and Republicans usually serve the interests of the rich. But the point is, when you're reallocating the flow of funds or purchasing power via the political mechanism, it devolves the whole game into a non-productive tit-for-tat fight. And so it's a net negative for everyone in the bigger picture. But people, it's almost like there's a myopia or like a short-sightedness that people don't understand that. They think the only way, well, I'm poor, I'm dispossessed, prices are going up faster than my wages. The only thing I can do is go and cast a vote for this guy that's going to take the political fight to the rich, tax the rich, tax the billionaires, give me more. But that, I guess my point is that solution is not a long-run solution. Like, you're just going to disincentivize the productive. They're going to fucking go elsewhere. They're going to stop producing. Capital production goes down, and like everyone gets poorer on a net basis.
That's been one of the hardest things I've had to go through over the 5-6 years of doing this podcast. And I think as you've come to the UK and seen what it's like, we are very much a civilized group of people who try to figure out, let's figure this out together. We're all in this together. Yeah. We are a society. We don't have, I think Americans have this fairly recent history of, kicking out the Brits, becoming a republic, having a number of freedoms enshrined in your constitution. So you have a different way of approaching politics to us. I mean, the Democrats are a bit weird at the moment, but generally speaking, this kind of distrust of government that they are meant to serve us,
right,
and not us serve them. Even though it's gone a bit haywire recently, we don't really have that here.
Yeah.
We've gone from monarchy to politics. And so we've always tended to figure it out. And so I think there's some people who listen to the show from America haven't understood why I haven't been on the same page as them.
Sure.
It's just taken a bit longer. But I am now in that kind of political paralysis at the moment because I see it like you see the Matrix. I see it now in that it doesn't matter who I vote for, it's the same.
Yeah.
They're both voting away my money. And also as I've built more businesses, I've had to go through all the difficulties of running a business. Just a bar alone. I talked about this on the podcast. Just a bar alone. All the different licenses I have to have for a bar that has 200 people that come to it. If I want to put in a new fixed structure, say this was my bar, and say I wanted to change these to a different set of seats, I have to put in planning permission to the council, and then the council have to come and they have to check. And they have to agree to allow me to put that in. So I cannot change the seating in the bar that I run because of that. The football club, we had new floodlights put in, and they were 15 meter. whatever the number, 15 foot. I can't remember what the size. And the size was wrong. It needs to be 16. So we put in an amended planning application and they rejected it. So we have to go through another full planning application, which is another form. Just the constant bullshit that gets in the way. And then when you start looking at the rounds of taxes, the difficulty of opening bank accounts, like it's really fucking hard just to run a business.
Yes.
And then I have to give most of the money we make away.
Yeah. Right.
So I think I'm coming to where you are, or you are at, and a number of other people. It's just taken a lot longer.
I mean, it's okay. One of the things I did when I got here was it was like the King's birthday, the first day I was in London, maybe the second day I was in London. And they were doing the entire march there in front of the Buckingham Palace, I think is what it's called. And one of the things they did, I have a great video of it actually, is they were flying over. So there's that arch, there's that long road leading up to Buckingham.
Horse Cars Parade.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know the name of it. There's the giant golden statue right there in front of the palace. And they were flying military planes right along that corridor. So it'd fly over the arch, down the road, and past the palace. But they were flying different generations. So they would fly like I don't know what year, 50s planes, a group of them would fly by, and some 1960s planes, 70s, and the big bombers. And then finally, the end was like the 2020 jet fighters flying very low, very slow. And it was just such a flex of military power, and the last planes had the different trailing colors behind them, like the British colors.
Oh, was it the, that would be the Red Arrows.
The Red Arrows. Yeah. I think so. They look like very sharp looking little military fighters.
I know, the Red Arrows, they're like, for every big event revolving around the monarchy, or even things like big sporting events, the Red Arrows come in and they do their flybys, but you know them because they're red planes.
Yeah, I don't know if they're red or not. I have to check out the video. But anyways, what's going through my mind this whole time is like, all right, we're celebrating one guy's birthday. Like, how many millions of pounds of jet fuel are we running just to have this little demonstration? People are loving it. I'm loving it, by the way. Like, it's just cool. It's to see all this. And then so the planes go by, everyone's cheering, taking videos. We walk down to the end of the road near the palace. And then, all these horse soldiers on horseback carrying swords.
With their big hats.
Big hats and armor, like very classic looking stuff. They're kind of like distributing the crowd a little bit. And then all of a sudden, who drives out? But the king, right? The king drives out in his, I think it was a Rolls Royce, and he kind of gives a little hand wave and drives on to his birthday party or wherever he was going. And I was just like the whole time, I'm like, what is the numbers on this? Like, what is the payroll? What is the jet fuel? What is the military spend on this little flex for this guy's birthday? And do these people know, like, do other people think that they're actually carrying the burden for this? Like, you go to this show, you're like, oh, it's a free show. It's cool. I get to see it. Not knowing that if you're a UK citizen, like, obviously you're paying for that.
But I think the work's been done. It's a shame we haven't got Danny here because I'll have him look it up. But I think the study's been done is that you're thinking that in terms of spend. Mm-hmm. I see that as a almost like Cirque du Soleil for the royal family. It's they're advertising the royal family. The royal family don't really have any power. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes. There's the ceremonial things where the prime minister goes to the king and gets him to approve parliament decision, but he doesn't actually have any power. And I think the monarchy is tourism. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. You saw it. People go to Buckingham Palace. They go and see all these things, and I'm pretty sure they've done the work and they've done the studies that the royal family do deliver a net positive income to the United Kingdom based on tourism. I'm almost certain that's true, but again, somebody might disprove that. It's a very look. I'm not a monarchist. I am anti-establishment. Yeah. But I do recognize historically the role that the monarchy played. They used to play a much more important role, and I know it's a drama series. It's worth watching The Crown. Okay. The role that the Queen played before we had social media and the internet, and we just had radio broadcasts or the TV and bringing the country together. And she almost had pretty much an unimpeachable, 75 years as Queen, or 85 years. Yeah. And I think the world modernized beyond a monarchy during her reign. Right. And I think maybe during his reign, we will see that more. I mean, essentially, nobody's really a big fan of King Charles. He was horrendous to Princess Diana. His son, Harry, has now gone off and tried to exploit his position to become a media person in the US, and that hasn't gone down well. His brother is a nonce. I think the royal family is struggling at the moment, but I don't know where it will be in the future.
Yeah, I've also, I don't know if there's any truth to this, but I've heard it described that the royal family gives people another outlet for kind of if they have frustration with the politics or whatever in Britain, you can direct some of that frustration at the monarchy rather than just the parliament or the political.
Maybe.
And in the US, we don't have that, right? It all goes red versus blue. So maybe there's a benefit to diffusing some of that political angst.
I'm not sure on that one. I don't feel that one. I just feel that the monarchy gets criticized on its own for its own decisions. Like Prince Andrew was criticized for paying off his lawsuit retaining to Epstein. There's lots of... I think they're judged on their own decisions and their own behavior. I don't feel like we use the anger of the country against them or anger of the current situation. Occasionally, some people may, they may look at the, times are tough and, we've got these high energy prices at the moment, high inflation. They might look at the royal family and go, "Well, it's ridiculous they spend all this money on his birthday." Right. But generally speaking, the royal family has a budget, and I'm almost certain they deliver a net positive.
But it's a state-backed budget, right?
It is. Yes, it is a state-backed budget. But I think it's one of those things where the decision is made as the net. Like if you got rid of the royal family and the Buckingham Palace and all those things, how many people will come to London? It's one of the appeals of coming to London for... remember, outside the world of Bitcoiners, that's anti-establishment. Just if you're a 14-year-old girl in New York, you want to come see Buckingham Palace, and you think Prince William is the history. Yeah. No. So there's a certain.
I can see that, but then I can see that argument equally being applied to the American war machine. It's like, look, we make so much money going out and imperializing the world. Why don't let's just let that thing roll? Yeah,
I mean, the slight difference is that profit. If it's profiteering on the blood of Iraqis, it's slightly different from. Having a flyby in London.
It is. But I just don't I just have a hard time advocating for theft, basically. It's the royal family has a budget, but where's it coming from? It's coming from proceeds stolen. Does it support tourism? Surely it does, but maybe it could pay for itself on its own tourism rather than being paid for by taxpayers.
Well, I think you wrap it into the state. If you think state and all tax, if your position is all taxation is theft, then you disagree with the royal family as much as you disagree with government and taxation. Yeah. If you I'm more in the Dominic Frisby camp these days. Dominic is anti-high tax, but he believes a reasonable small amount of tax to pay for the certain things in society we need is fair value, and I'm kind of with him in that. And then if you can justify within that things that government can do which have a net benefit to the country or the government coffers, they can tax you less. So, for example, if you run the monarchy as a private company run by the government and they had a budget and they delivered a net increase in income to the government to reduce taxes, you go, okay, well, I can accept that argument because, as much as I'm very much down the anti-government rabbit hole these days, I'm still not in the anarchist no government position just yet, because more on a practical reasons, because I don't think it happens.
Yeah, I agree, actually. And I've tried to be more specific when I talk about this, to separate government from the state. Like the state is that enterprise that's taking from you. You have no consent. Like, again, if you want to leave the US, right? Say, hey, this is a bad deal. I'm a taxpayer here. I don't like the services I'm getting. I'm going to move to London or wherever else it may be.
40%.
Everything above a $2 million net worth, they steal before you leave, right?
Everything.
Well, no. I'm saying everything above $2 million net worth is taxed at 40%.
Yeah, unbelievable.
It's crazy. So they're stealing 40% of everything you've got above $2 million, which isn't that much money anymore.
But and don't you also rescind your citizenship?
You also have to rescind your citizenship in the process. You can't. It's not enough. It's one of those few territorial tax systems where you can't just live abroad. Like if you don't live in London X months a year, you don't get taxed in London. Or UK. There's the US and one tiny other country.
Is it like Eritrea?
Something like that.
Something weird, yeah.
But if it's just like, we're so conditioned to it, and it's like just kind of the way of the world. We don't have many options, really hardly any other options. So we just think this is the way things are and we just accept it. But that's a really bad deal, right? Like if you could imagine going to any other service provider and you're like, no, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to take my assets. And if you're at a hotel, right, if you're like posting a security bond to the hotel and you're like, I don't like this hotel, I'm going to go to another one. They're like, all right, we're going to steal 40% of your bond before you leave and go to the next one.
Yeah.
You're like, this is a shit deal. What are you talking about? Like, give me the money back. I'm going to go over here. But when it comes to a nation state, which Samson Mao analogizes to a hotel, which I think is a pretty useful analogy, we take it as the norm. And I don't know what that is. Is that just part of the human condition? Like, and that's why I'm worried about taxation. When we say I'm pro taxation, but not high taxation, it's like, well, where do you draw the line?
Not pro, accepting of.
Well,
like reluctant.
But what is high? What is high? Like, it's a slippery slope.
Of course. And I wouldn't give you a very good answer now. I accept that there are services that need to be provided by a country, and I accept there's a certain amount of taxation that's needed for that.
That's fine if it's opt-in, opt-out. And technically, if it's opt-out, it's not really taxation at that point, because you can just say, no, it's a service fee or security fee that the nation state is taking. But if you can say no and go elsewhere, then it's not technically taxation. But well, you can't say no and go elsewhere and they still steal your shit.
Well, we can. I could say no and just go and live in another country. I can go and live in Monaco. I could go and live in Antigua. Right. I can do that. We don't have an exit tax.
Right.
So I can just opt out. Now, look, I think you have to be in a fortunate position to do that, because you have to be able to, one, relocate, afford the relocation, have the skill set to relocate. So I've got a podcast. I could go back to Zoomingham and I can do it anywhere in the world. I have enough money to do it. So look, it's a privileged position to be able to do that, but I have that. I think it's different for you because you don't have that, because you have that exit tax, which is, if you're ever going to do it, then you better do it sooner rather than later.
It's a crazy thing. And maybe that is my primary gripe, is with the U.S. exit tax. Again, I think humanity in the long run will move past taxation. I think at some point we'll look at this legalized, regularized plunder as a means of scaling society as something that's antiquated. And it served its purpose, right? It got us from whatever to where we are today. But in the long run, I think in the digital age, things will just look more consensual, because it's more difficult to pin people down, put them in a tax farm, and steal from them on a regular basis. So as people have more options to avoid that, I think they're going to exercise those options, and the world will just look a lot different.
I think that's just like, you can almost look at any technology though, and see how we evolve beyond certain things. It's even like when I was discussing the show with Daniel on the way down, I was driving down, and we as Bitcoiners are very, very quick to criticize fiat as terrible money. But I put it back to Daniel. I said, but what about the good things of fiat? Are there positive things fiat has done? And of course there are. The easy movement of money around the world before we had Bitcoin.
But that didn't require fiat.
Well,
because you could just have a gold-backed currency and does the same thing in terms of speed.
But a gold-backed currency could still be manipulated. I mean, the gold market is manipulated right now. I mean, you could argue
largely by fiat, though, by derivatives and whatnot.
Of course, but I'm saying it still could be manipulated. But I'm just saying is that like fiat served a purpose at the time. It fixed some things that gold didn't have, and then we outgrew it.
I would just qualify that and say currency fixed things that gold didn't do, right? I talk about this a lot. Portability. Gold lacked portability, which is a big problem if you want a globally scaling market, right? We need to be able to move money around the world very fast and easy. We can't send container ships of gold every fucking 10 minutes. So currency, when you put currency on top of gold, it solves a lot of those portability problems. But that's not the same thing as justifying fiat. Fiat it's a zero reserve currency, right? If a gold-backed currency is a full reserve currency, fiat's a zero reserve currency. You don't need fiat per se to solve the portability problem. I don't think there's any additional value add to moving from a full reserve currency to a zero reserve currency. Now, the argument would be, when there's an economic downturn, we need to print more money. Where's that money going to come from? Well, we'll just, we've monopolized the currency supply. We'll just produce new units. We'll fractionally reserve the banks, and we'll give it to the people that we think need it most, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. And we gradually descend into this like Marxist hellhole. So
thinking about that though, I mean, it's a question I've put to a couple of people. I've never actually got a solid yes or no response from anyone on this, but even the money printing, can you not even see some benefits of the money printing? I can see the negatives. Obviously, the Cantillon effect, I can see the fact that we've got growing wealth divide, massive, all those negatives, I totally recognize them.
Business cycle, misallocation of capital.
Totally recognize all of that.
Destroying the middle class.
Yeah, no, look, I recognize all of that. But are there periods of money printing which have led to, I don't know, I mean, the US is one of the best money printers in the world, has one of the fastest growing economies. Has it not led to more capital that can be allocated? Has it not led to more innovation in technology? Are there any benefits that have existed from it or come from it?
So this is a common, especially a no-corner argument, right?
No, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying.
I understand. A lot of no-corners will say, separate from that question, that, well, you need inflation to drive innovation. And they'll just say, look, in the US, like we've had inflation and we had innovation. So then they just say correlation equals causation. You need inflation to drive innovation. I don't buy that argument.
No, it's not even the point I'm making. I'm not saying you need inflation to drive innovation.
No, you're asking what the benefits are.
No, I'm saying it has a massive amount of cheap capital become available to investors, led to more innovation because there's just been more capital to invest.
But the cheap capital came from the backs of savers, right? It was stolen from savers and given to investors to misallocate, I would argue. So I would say this. This is the difference between like economic history and economic science. We can say things about economic science, right? Like man must act, man prefers present satisfaction to later satisfaction, all other things being equal. That's where we get the interest rate. Man values leisure time, all of these axioms that support Austrian economics. That's science, right? That's the reductive or deductive science of Austrian economics that we talk about a lot in Bitcoin. Then there's economic history. And you can say, oh, well, this thing happened and then that thing happened. And I'm claiming this is causation. But that's totally fucking unprovable. Right? I could say that we printed $6 trillion in the past 3 years or whatever it's been, and TikTok became popular. So somehow printing money made TikTok a popular app. I don't even know if the timing lines up on that, but I'm just giving you an example. You're just cherry picking two things out of the world and saying these two things map onto each other, but you can't actually do that in economic science. So the whole point is it's always subject to interpretation. So when you ask me, has inflation done anything good? I can't even really give you an answer. Like, sure, there's probably some benefits in there somewhere. When there's an economic downturn and liquidity is scarce and everyone's strapped and over-indebted and no one has cash, when you inject all that liquidity into the system, it definitely gives people a sense of confidence again, right? People get checks in the mail in the US, even though you're getting like a $3,000 check per US household, and they printed $46,000 per U.S. household. So the other $43,000.
Where did the rest go?
Exactly. So is there a benefit? Sure, that's a psychological benefit, right? People that are none the wiser, they get the check in the mail, they're probably going to go spend it, buy something, et cetera, et cetera. That's stimulative to the economy. But it's very much like alcohol, right? And this is what Milton Friedman said about inflation, that the good effects come soon, the bad effects come later. And and you get into this. Vervaeke talks about addiction being like a reciprocal narrowing. The guy that's an alcoholic has a few too many drinks, wakes up late for work, gets in trouble with his boss, has a bad day at work. So therefore he has a few more drinks. He's a little bit more late to work the next day. He's more in trouble. Maybe he loses his job. Then he has a few more drinks. And before you know it, he's dead or in a ditch somewhere. Fiat currency is very much the same process. Like we print a little bit of money to get out of this catastrophe. Yep. We misallocate the capital. We increase the liabilities in the system, non-linear to the money itself. So the next time there's a collapse, we have to print exponentially more money to cover the existing liabilities. And it's this addictive descent into hell.
It's Giacomo Zucco said this to me a long time ago. So it's like heroin.
Yes.
He said every time you just have that, you need a little bit more heroin to reach the same high. But he said, when you have the crash, the longer you leave it, the crash is going to come harder.
Yes.
You got to take the poison at some point. You got to stop.
Yeah. And you need to let the crash is the reset, by the way, to reality, right? Yeah. It's you going to rehab. It's you getting the drugs out of your system, whatever analogy you want to use here. And we need that, unfortunately. We either need the hyperinflation of fiat currencies worldwide to get a hard reset to a Bitcoin standard, and I think that's the path that likely happens given human history and incentives and precedent and all that. Or you need like this hard wake-up call to all central banks in the world that, hey, this economic paradigm we've been running does not work. Keynesian economics is bullshit. We've deceived ourselves into thinking we can print money to produce wealth and stimulate and control the economy like it's some kind of machine, which is just the wrong metaphor, by the way. Like, we talk about central bank policy tools. They literally say like pulling levers, pressing buttons. Like the economy is not a machine. the economy is a complex emergent system. Like you're talking about something more like the weather than a machine. So like humans, like when I lived in Kauai, you could not get a forecast that was accurate 1 day in advance.
Why not?
Literally. I don't know. The weather in Kauai is crazy. The clouds spin around the island. Like it'd say it's going to be sunny tomorrow and it rains. Like the forecast was useless, essentially. What in the world makes us think we can't figure out the weather 1 day in advance in Kauai, but we can plan a global economic system decades or even hundreds of years in advance through these policy tools? Like it's hubris. It's colossal hubris, essentially. So I think hopefully maybe it's a matter of us moving off of this mechanistic paradigm where we've thought that the world is a machine, and we're waking up to the reality of like complex systems.
It's weird because in this like Bitcoin world as well, I don't know if you find this, but it's like if you meet somebody in the not in that world, and they're like, what do you do for a living? Like sometimes I feel a little bit embarrassed.
What do you say? What's your answer to that question?
So it depends who it is. Like if I was on a date, I'm definitely not going to say I'm a Bitcoiner because they just think it's just all this judgment might come with. So I just say, look, I'm kind of a journalist. I make podcasts and documentaries. And if they ask why, it's economics. And if they really push me, I'll say, well, I look at it through the lens of like fixed currencies like Bitcoin. So like I really take my time to get that. Some people I'll just say, look, I make a Bitcoin podcast. But it depends on the audience. But usually it's very rare someone goes, oh yeah, I mean, look, I get that. Inflation's out of control. And blah, blah, blah. Usually it's just like, you just have to do, because I don't want to deal with instant FUD or judgment. I just cannot deal with that.
Do you get recognized a lot?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like random. I'm getting a lot in my hometown now.
Really?
Yeah. So it never used to happen in Bedford.
Yeah.
I could go to New York and like 3 times on the street someone will stop me.
Yeah.
But then I'll go home and no one gives a shit. But it's happening a lot more. And I think that's because of the football team, because the football team's getting noticed. So everyone wants to know who the owner is. So yeah, that's starting to happen. But yeah, and do you know what? Everyone's decent.
Yeah.
More in a bull market.
Yeah, of course.
During the last bull market, it was crazy. I mean, in the elevator in New York, a football match in London, like it was quite regular. It's been less so recently.
Yeah.
I don't know what I think about it.
It's been happening to me way more than I think it should, based on like just the number of followers and things that I have. I'm like, we're tiny, right? Compared to the internet as a whole. But I've been recognized twice in London in a few days, which is weird. People just stopping you on the street. Yeah,
it's weird.
Thank you for expanding my mind. I'm like, wow, fucking that's amazing. And then I found when you get into groups that are more YouTubers, you get recognized a lot more frequently. I went to this week-long meditation retreat with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's a big YouTube lecture guy. So out of the 2,500 people that were there, I got recognized like 9 times in a few days because they're YouTubers.
But they see you on YouTube. That's the other difference.
That's the thing.
Yeah, so the people who stop me are saying, oh, I watch you on YouTube. It's never like I listen to your podcast. Right. I watch you on YouTube because they're seeing your face.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. It's I think it's funny because it happens with my kids sometimes, and they're like, their minds are blown. I tell you a funny story. This is hilarious. So the other day, I'm out on a date, and we go just in Bedford. We go to this place called Chicken George, which is it's almost like Americanized chicken, like a bowl of Korean chicken or buffalo or whatever. And I'm on this date with this girl, and she knows one of the girls who plays for my football team, but she doesn't know anything about Bitcoin. She doesn't know anything of what I do. And she was like, oh, Tash was saying like you've got like a really interesting job, and she was surprised I don't know who you are. I was like, no, I'm not surprised you don't know who I am. Like, if you're in this like little nerd world of Bitcoin, you might know
you're a nerdy dude.
But like, no one knows who I am. It's not what you think. Honestly, I'm an absolute fucking nobody. But if you're a Bitcoin nerd, you do. And she's like, oh, anyway. Literally 1 minute later, this dude comes around the corner. He goes, holy shit, you're Pete McCormack. I'm like, what? He goes, I love your podcast, man. How you doing? I was like, yeah, all right. He's like, all right, well, look, I'll leave you to it. See you later. And then she's there going, what the fuck? And so that was a bit weird, but
that's funny.
Yeah, it's a weird world, man.
It is. I don't know. The whole nature of celebrity is being decentralized, I guess, right? There used to just be a few people in magazines. Now it's like whatever nerdy niche you're into, but not necessarily nerdy, whatever niche you're into, that you're more likely to see Instagram influencers or YouTubers or whatever. And I really enjoy it actually, because the people that approach me, like their eyes are gleaming. They're like, thank you. Whatever
grateful.
you did. Like my business was in shambles, or I didn't understand this, or my family didn't have, and then watching your show, I learned and things got better. So it's like, for me, it's very fulfilling.
Well, the thing for me that's been really interesting about meeting people who listen to the show is that I think you tend to meet people who are more in your tribe. Like there's sub-tribes in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Your tribe is very different from my tribe, right? Mine is like a little bit more European centrist. Yours is a little bit more Austrian, so the things they agree with you, that they tend to agree with you on, they disagree with. So there's like these different tribes that build up. And so when you tend to meet people, they're always really grateful because they've been attracted to what you do and they're really kind. And for me, it's made me realize this Twitterverse is very different from the podcast world.
Sure.
And I think it's very easy to be sucked into thinking, I need to make content that Twitter's telling me I need to make, and then disregarding your audience. And so that's why I've always stuck with what the audience says. What are the emails I get? What are the comments on YouTube? Where are they? And then sticking to my guns, because if we all follow Twitterverse, we'd all make the same fucking show.
For sure. I need to be better about that, actually. My current practice is to just try and have conversations that I find interesting.
No,
So
that's a good thing to do, I think.
Something like I'm trying to learn, basically. I'm trying to figure stuff out. Like I have an unsatiated curiosity about a certain topic. It's like I want to read the book and then talk to the person that's either read the book or wrote the book. And something about that learning out loud is what I call it. You see two people kind of at the edge of their own understanding, wrestling with an idea. It's almost like a spectator sport of some kind, where it's like people, I enjoy that feeling when I listen to whatever, like a Jordan Peterson podcast, and he's got someone on that's talking about something I don't understand, and you tell Jordan doesn't understand it. He's trying to learn. It's like we're all three wrapped up in this process of trying to understand the thing. And that's just been the approach I've taken so far. And I don't read YouTube comments. I don't know. I'm still hesitant about opening that.
Do you let them all through?
I think so.
So we approve ours because there's so much spam.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've looked at yours. There's so much spam. We now approve every time. We've done it for 3 years, but we don't censor. If you'll go in there and you'll see loads of like Pete McCormack's a status gug and fat bastard and all that shit.
So you approve them as long as they're not
everything.
Scammy.
All we remove is the like join our WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
We remove anything about Hex, but we leave like in the Cardano ones because like Hex ones are spam. Cardano ones are people who genuinely think Cardano is a valuable currency. So we leave it in there so people can talk back to them. I very rarely read the comments, but I will occasionally. I tend to, every show, I just get a little sample. Give me 10 or 15, and that will give me the sense of it. Like, okay, Jason Lowry, people thought I interrupted him too much. Robert Breedlove, they thought I didn't push back on X enough. Junseth, they found that funny. And so that 10 or 15 will give me the sense of each show and whether I need to rethink my approach.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah, but don't read them all because what happens is you're naturally drawn to the shitty ones. And so then I'll call up Danny. I'll be like, he was like, Pete, that's like one comment. I read like 50 that were really positive. I was like, but that one really hurt my feelings.
It's human nature. It's human nature. We over-index on the negative.
There's a really good Rogan clip. If you search for Don't Read the Comments Rogan on YouTube and you watch that one, he gives you like a really good bit of advice. But no, if you can get away from reading the comments. But I think the strategy of, my view, like what is success? Success is control over your time. It's not money.
Yeah.
You've earned good money. I've earned good money. You know, it doesn't make you happy, really.
Yeah, I call it freedom. But control over your time.
Control of your time. And by the way, the older you get, the more important that becomes. Sure. Being able to wake up today, like today I come down and hang out with you. We're going to make the show. I'm going to have steak at Hawksmoor. It's a fucking brilliant day. And then tomorrow I might, Monday, my daughter's sports day, I'll go to that. Some people can't because they're stuck in. Yeah. So that to me is freedom. And so if you can get control of that, that's the best thing. And I think the way to get there is just make the shows you want to make, and you will find a group of people who are with you on that. I think once you chase the numbers, it gets a bit tricky. Yeah. I think there's a few people in our industry that have like chased the numbers and they've suffered because of that. Yeah. So, and look, don't get me wrong. I'm going to do a sailor show every year because I want a sailor show. I want to talk to him, and you need to have a few big shows. Yeah. But generally speaking, I think chasing numbers always fails. Yeah, there's definitely a numbers game to be played. And I guess I haven't
indexed on that. We talked about this a little bit in Prague. I just haven't indexed on that a lot yet because we've just grown fast, which really is, I'm surprised. I thought we were kind of a niche thing. But at some point, you're running a business, right? And numbers, downloads are dollars essentially, or Bitcoin, whatever you're converting it into. And so if you're going to run a good business, you got to manage your top line. So
but that's like...
But you don't want to like sell out the content to manage to the numbers, because then you dilute the whole message and brand, et cetera. So,
but I think there's a difference between trying to get Jordan Peterson on, and then Eric Weinstein, and then Michael Malice, and mix and still not neglecting up and coming people, versus having a YouTube banner which was like, this guy made $1 million by the time he was 12, and like a big cheesy grin. Right. When you start literally when you're just being clickbait.
Yes. And the weird faces on the...
Don't do that shit. Yeah. I think that's the road to hell in terms of this.
This kind of goes into the topic.
We got time.
Of mimesis a little bit that I mentioned I've been reading about.
Yeah, what's that? Tell me what that's
Mimetic Desire is what it's also called. This is the thesis of Rene Girard. I've only read...
somebody directed me to that. Jeremy Welch.
Okay.
It's a Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel's favorite book.
Yeah.
It's Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World. Yes. Is the magnum opus of Girard. And it's about this notion of mimetic desire. Very complicated to talk about because it's something like we're always in all the time. But basically, Aristotle said something like, humans excel other animals in our ability to imitate. So we actually learn and compile our personalities through imitation. And you see this with kids, like you've been a parent, right? Those kids, especially when they're toddler kind of age, they're perfect mirrors of you. They're not doing what you tell them to do. They're like imitating your behaviors. If you're getting mad, or if you're doing something that you might not approve of, like you're going to see it in that kid real fast. And it's like they hold up this mirror to you. Well, it turns out that process never stops. Like we're doing it right now. As we interact, I am this amalgam of all the personalities that I've ever interacted with across time. Not a pro rata amalgam. It's not like everyone you interact with, you just incorporate. It's who you are drawn to, who you find interesting, who you find awe-inspiring. Like you're more likely to imitate them. And I don't know if as I started to read this, I found things like certain ways I say things. I'm like, oh, I got that from my friend so-and-so back in this place. Like, because he used to say it the same way or do the same facial gesture, whatever it is. And so this is a very interesting thesis about that. And the reason YouTube brought that to mind was because whatever's working in the YouTube space, right? If it's making these weird faces or making these clickbaity things, well, people copy that and it spreads mimetically, right? And this is obviously has connections to internet memes that we typically consider like these little cultural idea packets that spread. Well, we're just propagating those all the time. And it's a game you can never opt out of.
Is that not a little bit like what we were talking about earlier, where it's almost like the alcohol addiction that you're like borrowing from the future? And so by chasing the memes and the downloads, it's almost like if you're clickbaiting and you've hit a certain number of like downloads, then you need to keep doing that. And if you don't hit that, like, what are you going to do next? Whereas if you just don't give a fuck, like if you go onto our show, our YouTube banners, it will literally be a photo of you and it'll say Breedlove. It won't say Breedlove, what is money? We won't say Mimetic Desire, whatever. Like it's not going to say that. That is our identity, and we're cool with that. And if it doesn't mean we get as many downloads, but the downloads are authentic. Right. Again, we want the authentic ones because we're happy with kind of like authentic growth.
I agree with that.
And so I don't want to get sucked. I've seen other people get sucked into that, and it becomes this latest addiction. For
sure. And I just finished this book actually last night called Wanting. So Rene Girard's book, Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World, extremely difficult, almost like a human action type book, very dense, like 600 pages, hard to read.
You've turned me off already.
It's really good, but it's like, it hurts. This other book, Wanting, is like written in the past couple of years. It's a synthesis of his ideas written in a very accessible way. And one of the things the author highlights, I don't know the name of the author, sorry. But if you Google Wanting Mimetic Desire, it's the book that comes up, is that humans have to distinguish between, he calls them thick and thin desires. I would call them deep desires and shallow desires. So a shallow desire might be like, I need to pump these numbers, so let me do whatever I can on the YouTube banner. But a deep desire, like what you just articulated, something like you want to be authentic. You want to be, this is your brand. This is how you want it to look, right? There's design considerations. I'm sure there's an element of your personal style that's like built into the show, right? Like you're tatted up, cool rocker dude. You make these kind of cool looking banners, and it's guest focused, which I think is also part of like the ethos of your show. So you have to like not get caught up in the mimetic contagion sometimes. And just by standing out and being true to yourself and true to your principles, you'll actually induce other people to imitate you instead. So it's kind of part of like being a leader in some respect.
I think one of the primary goal is longevity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, love the job. Fortunate enough that I get to work now with my brother.
Mm-hmm.
My son works for me. Danny's become one of my best friends in the world. And we've got this really great team. You know, we get to do the coolest job in the world, hang out with great people, travel. You know, little privileges. You know, you get invited to things, and your sporting events. I get cup final tickets and things like. There's just all these benefits. I'd like to think it's a kind of job you don't retire from. You just can do forever, right? And I just want longevity. Yeah. And so in my head, I'm like, the longevity of this is based around two things: the quality of the product and whether people trust me.
Yeah.
If you lose trust, you're done.
For sure.
And if the product quality drops, you're done.
Yeah.
And so when I look at what others do, there's absolutely no doubt, and I've said it over and over again, unapologetically, very early on, I looked at Rogan a lot and thought, well, what's he doing?
Of course.
Why do people trust him? And I was like, he's just being him. Funny enough, I don't even listen to it as much anymore now, but I was like, that's I trust him. I don't agree with everything he says, but I trust. It's like you. I don't agree with everything you say, but I trust you. But there's other people out there, I don't agree with them and I don't trust them. I think they're full of shit.
Right.
You know, I think they're playing a character.
Yes.
And so the longevity. So like, I definitely took ideas from Rogan. I took ideas from Rich Roll.
Yes.
I look around and I say, what? Interesting. I don't listen to Bitcoin podcasts, by the way. Very, very rarely. I listened to the Marty and the Balaji one and it was brilliant, but I avoid that because I don't want us to all feel the same.
Yes.
But I look at other people and say, well, what are they doing well? How do I get longevity? What have they done? So that's what I do.
Yeah. And that's what we're all like, no matter what business you're in, right? You either have someone you look up to or your competitors, you're seeing what they're doing, and you're constantly trying to map your behavior or actions to what works, right? Whatever's being effective. So the general point is we're all in this game of mimetic desire all the time. So one example I thought that was really useful in the book, this is again from the book Wanting, is just the nature of a handshake. So if I go to shake your hand, like I extend my hand to shake your hand, and you reach out and you shake my hand, we have kind of this little moment. We might smile. Hey, how you doing? You know, these warm feelings. Our desires are like linked up. We've connected with one another. So you're basically imitating, right? I extend my hand, you shake it. We're on the same wavelength, so to speak. Now, if I extend my hand to shake it and you refuse to shake my hand, all of a sudden I'm going to imitate you actually, because you're exhibiting these feelings of like coldness or disconnection. And now I'm going to feel that like, oh, he rejected my handshake. All of a sudden I am now unconsciously even just imitating how you're behaving towards me. So it's this weird thing where if the whole world if the global marketplace is like a brain, right? We're always talking about the analogy between the human brain and kind of the marketplace being where all our brains are connected via the price signal. Well, the brain has these things called mirror neurons, right? That are mirroring one another. So it's almost like we are mirror neurons in this global brain. And it's a weird thing to talk about because you're always in the game. And in many ways, I think it's the most fundamental act of exchange. We talk about exchange like goods or services, trading hands, but there's something even more fundamental than that, and that is our actual interpersonal interactions. And we're trading cultural and ideological data packets with every engagement.
Wow.
So it blows my fucking mind.
I had a handshake rejected this week.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And how did it feel?
Well, she was 8, I think, or something. She was young. It's so weird.
She was 8, okay.
Sting's granddaughter.
Okay.
So Sting played in Bedford Park.
Uh-huh.
Turns out his son is a Bitcoiner and also plays music. And he did an interview coming in saying, the best thing about Bedford is Rail Bedford. So I messaged him on Twitter and said, I'll come and drop you off some shirts. So I went down to the concert and he got us in and I gave him the shirts and his 3 kids were there and went to fist bump them all and the youngest daughter just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
got rejected.
She might just be too young to know what it was.
No, he said, you got to earn it with this one.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, she had a tough face on her.
There you go.
I was like, okay. So that we have a world where people have to earn handshakes.
Yeah.
So I get it.
And it stands out in your memory too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That little feeling of rejection.
Do you know what it was? I was like, that's kind of, you're interesting and different.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I ever met up with him again, that's the kid I want to know about.
Right.
What's she up to? Because the other 2, 3 great kids, lovely kids, but that she stood out to me. I'm like, what is she up to? What's she doing in life? I think she's going to do something interesting.
And you might bring her like an extra gift or something to try and win her over.
Please give me a fist bump. Please give me a fist bump. So, I mean, I don't even know if there's a connection to Bitcoin with that, but
I'm curious though about this mimesis thing.
Yeah.
And this is I don't know, just a point of curiosity for me, but like to what extent does that relate to monetization of certain assets? Like if you see people holding gold historically and you see them becoming wealthier, right? Their purchasing power is going up. Do people just start copying them? Like, oh, well, maybe I'll just hold some gold. And before you know it, it spreads, right? Like whatever is working, people are copying one another's strategy. And before you know it, we're on a global gold standard, something like that.
Well, that was
how that might apply to Bitcoin.
That was a question I was going to put to you. Is that a reason that we have this kind of like strong ideology in Bitcoin? Like a lot of people, especially in the Twitterverse, where I'm sure you can apply this mimesis to Twitter and Twitter behavior. Is that why you get these kind of like culty kind of behavior? A lot of people, suddenly a wave will come through. Like seed oils are bad. We're all anti-seed oils. Steak's good. We're all eating steaks.
Well, sure.
Is that what it's in play there?
I think so, because like you said earlier about trust, right? That we, at least in this little Bitcoin cult, most of us, it's kind of a high trust environment, right? If you say something or if Safedine says something about it, not even a Bitcoin or economics related topic, I'm listening. I'm like, oh, this is a guy that they pay attention. They're no bullshit. We're truth seekers, you might say. So I'm more likely to trust the signal, right? Seed oils are bad. I actually learned seed oils are bad through Bitcoiners. I learned about the carnivore diet through Bitcoiners. I've learned, it's taken me down a million book rabbit holes. So like the whole sovereign individual thing I learned through Bitcoin. That's through, if not pure imitation, at least opening your mind to other things that you may have never seen before.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
like, I trust this guy. He's smart. He finds this interesting. Maybe I will too. So let me look into it. So I'm not saying that it's pure imitation. It's not like every time you eat a steak, I need to suddenly eat a steak, but it's at least opening people's minds to alternative lifestyles, ways of being, diets, etc. And you see how quick it moves to the Bitcoin world, right? Like once seed oils are being disrespected, all of a sudden everyone's disrespecting the seed oils. It's
a really interesting thing that I found whereby I can go anywhere in the world, go up on Twitter. I could be in Lisbon, I could be in Ohio, I could be in Thailand, and I say, okay, I'm in town. Is there any Bitcoiners here who want to hang out? And they come, and you kind of instantly know you're gonna get along. You're gonna get along, and there's things you might not agree on everything, but you're gonna get along. You got enough crossover in the things you're interested in that you're gonna get on.
The basic values are there, right?
The basic values are there. It's the Orange Party thesis, which gets you away from this kind of like red v blue, guns v no guns, abortions v no abortions, like trans rights v like all these things that have created all this separation for the benefit of the machine to a group of people who are anti the machine, who may historically been from very different political positions, but have found a place where they've come together.
Yeah, and
so that kind of virus spreading through people, I think, is brilliant.
I do too. I think it's beautiful. You could say almost that humans are like religious animals. Like we need to organize ourselves beneath some story or symbolic canopy, right? Religion has provided this function historically. the nation state sort of does now. That was part of the big king's birthday party and all that. It's like demonstrating that symbolic canopy. But Bitcoin is an interesting one, right? It's a story that humans aren't really writing and rewriting. And it's something that obviously inspires people towards hard work and honesty and self-sovereignty, like good things for the individual. And so it's very fascinating to me. And I don't know, like we use these words, cult, religion, like they're used in a derogatory way. But I would argue that any social construct has these qualities.
Shared ideals.
Yeah. Take out the US dollar and look at the back of it. It's got a fucking pyramid and the eye of Horus on top of it. It's talk about culty, right? And I'm extra tuned in on this because of Taleb's recent comments, right?
Oh, dude, what? I mean,
Bitcoin has a long history of making really smart people look really stupid.
I saw your tweet on that.
And I think he's the pioneer of that comment at this point.
Have you ever spoken to Craig Warmke?
No.
So I interviewed him. He's one of those Bitcoin philosophers. Great guy. He did a thing called the saltiness index for journalists.
Mm-hmm.
How I think it's, I'm trying to remember. I think it's the correlation between how early they discovered Bitcoin and now how salty they are. Because really, you were given the Willy Wonka golden ticket, you were given the jackpot, and you rejected it. Nathaniel Popper's a great example of this. I absolutely love digital. Is it Digital Gold? The name of his book, I can't remember. It's the first book I read on Bitcoin back in whenever. And over time, he's just become a journalist who just does hit pieces now. I think he does New York Times hit pieces against Coinbase or whatever. It's just bollocks. He just writes bollocks. And I can imagine there's a scenario where he was writing about Bitcoin, not buying it, and he's just realized how fabulously wealthy he could be. And so Craig Warmke's done this whole saltiness index. And I think that saltiness index, it spreads outside of journalists. And I don't think the saltiness is just related to they didn't buy it and could have got fabulously wealthy. I think it's also, there's a saltiness related to how much pushback they get. And I think Taleb now, his position against Bitcoin is irrational. Well, firstly, he conflates Bitcoin and crypto together. That whole interview was, and I was like, for this interview to make any sense, you need to tell me if you're talking about Bitcoin or crypto. And if you're talking about crypto wrapping Bitcoin together, you've made a fundamental error, so let's disregard 100%. But I just think he's salty. That's all it is.
Yeah.
He's just salty.
His ego has been bashed. What is it? I guess, okay, back to mimesis, right? You see a lot of people, and by the way, like if I was an outsider looking at Bitcoin Twitter, I would be like, yeah, these people are kind of weird, right? They're all fucking eating meat. They all hate seed oils. They're very loud and antagonistic online. Like it's kind of a strange little...
We're a bunch of fucking weirdos.
Subculture, yeah. The one common denominator, which I really appreciate, is that we're all nerds in our own way. Like every time, and this is why I love hanging out with Bitcoiners, it's always some stimulating new discussion of some things I have never heard or thought about every single time. So like, again, Bitcoin's transformed my social life too. I used to like to just go and drink and go to parties or whatever. But now I like to go hang out with Bitcoiners sober and just like jive with these conversations and these ideas that are flowing that I can't find anywhere else in the world. Anyways, so from an outsider's perspective, we look like a weird group. There's also the tendency to be anti-mimetic sometimes. Like you don't want to be part of a group. You don't want to be seen as part of a group. You actually want to be seen as standing outside of it, right? They're all wrong. And Taleb, I think, is just the leader. Like he wrote the black paper or something like that. Like the here's why Bitcoin's going to zero mathematically, like a mathematical proof. And then all these mathematicans came out and said, hey, dude, you're full of shit. You can't say, like, it's not a mathematical proof that it's going to zero. And so he's throwing a tantrum or something, right? Like his ego, I don't know if it's the beef with Safedine or what, but he is just totally, and this is a writer I really like. I've read his books twice. He's a great writer. If he wrote them, I've also heard he plagiarized from Wittgenstein and these other from Mandelbrot.
But isn't it like great artist copy?
Well, once again, mimesis, right? Yeah. What is it? To copy one guy's plagiarism, but to copy 1,000 is research.
Yeah.
He's a good writer. To whatever extent he wrote his stuff, but his ego has become so entangled in this contention that he looks like a fucking buffoon at this point.
Yeah, but it's the same like Peter Schiff.
Yeah, of course.
There's just like this graveyard of boomers who've got it wrong. Even at the moment, I'm finding George Gammon getting a bit weird. He did a whole CBDC thing today. It just didn't make sense. I like George.
Yeah, I like George too. I haven't seen, again, I don't follow many people's content at all. I read books mostly. Right. So I do very little audio or video. But the last time I had George on the show, I felt like we found some middle ground.
Yeah, me too.
It was like, look, which boils down to whatever the market selects, right? If the market keeps selecting this thing, then it is good money.
Well, I find it interesting
not, then it's not.
That Taleb at this time is doing that, especially at a time where I'm feeling like the anti-Bitcoin machine, whether it's the media, big name personalities, the state, institutions, I'm starting to see some chinks in their armor. Mm-hmm. There was the thing that came out where, was it the IMF that came out the other day and said, we have to accept that Bitcoin can't be stopped.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah. Coinbase defeating the SEC. Yeah. For pretty much every presidential nominee outside of Biden and Trump, they're all pro-Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. I feel like this tide is now turning, and rightfully so. And at a time where people have good reason to distrust media, money, and institutions.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like this kind of tide is just starting to turn. I hope it continues. But it's funny at a time like that, someone like Taleb is still coming out and being given airtime. I mean, the interview did a great job of like pushing back on him. Great questions.
Yeah. What a weird, like you would not have predicted that maybe 10 years ago.
When he wrote the forward to the Bitcoin Standard.
Yeah, no. And he wrote a good forward, like he said good things about it.
He wrote Black Swan.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't understand. I mean, I guess it's easy to lose touch with reality when you're at the top of a given vertical, right? And the guy's kind of at the top. He made a lot of money. He has some very successful books. And maybe now the hubris has just caught up with him. He needs to stay humble and stack sats. And maybe that would humble his ass.
Well, look, one of the hardest things to do is say, I was wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I've had to do it a few times.
Yeah, same.
But I'm okay doing it because I actually realize it's a superpower. Yeah. Lockdowns. I was wrong. Mm-hmm. I got it wrong. I called it wrong. I am sorry.
Right.
I apologize. It wasn't through malice. Yeah. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot to do with politics.
Yes.
Like it's okay to do that. Nobody goes through their whole life 100% right about everything all the time.
Nobody ever. And the reason it's a superpower is because you're acknowledging your fallen, sinful, wayward nature. Like we are dealing with a very complex world. We're going to be wrong about shit a lot. And especially as things are changing faster and faster, you're going to be wrong about more and more things. So humility increasingly becomes the optimal strategy. Like you just don't, and I guess this comes with age too, because I know when I was younger, I thought I had it all figured out. And the older you get, you're like, wow, I really have fucking nothing figured out.
I'm older than you though. Don't know how much older. How old are you? You just
37.
Yeah, I'm 45 in October. Fuck's sake, countdown to 50. It comes with that. And having kids getting older.
Kids helps a lot.
Yeah, but kids getting older. So one of the big, most transformational moments for me with kids is the moment they come at you with a very mature argument against you and they're right. Mm-hmm. And you have to go, I had it recently with my son. I had a bit of a disagreement with him and my daughter over something because they're being fucking annoying. And my son made a point to me and he was very mature. He was totally right. I was 100% in the wrong. And I had to say, I'm sorry, you are totally right. Yeah. And that happens because like look, my dad's wrong about shit all the time. Yeah. And I'm now as a 44-year-old can see that and tell him.
Yeah.
But to see my son go through that, firstly, brave enough to actually challenge his dad because it is difficult and to be right. And so I think more than anything, seeing that with my kids makes me realize I can be wrong about a lot.
Yeah. And that's, you're setting a good example for them though, to actually, hey, I was wrong. Let me walk that back. Let's walk through it again.
Yeah.
And these things are very difficult. I don't know that I guess it never gets easier if you're operating from your ego. Like the ego is always going to feel that little tinge, but it gets easier, I think, with kids too, because it's like, it's not about you, right? It's like, how do I handle the situation correctly for them?
They destroy your ego.
Yeah. Which is great.
My kids think I'm
actually.
such a dick.
Yeah.
They think I'm such a douche. It's so funny.
Maybe that's a common thread too, is like, my mom said that having kids is an opportunity to live life beyond yourself. And something about Bitcoin, like it's not the same thing, but you do get really focused on all these bigger things, right? And other people and the long term and all that. So you start to live a life a bit more beyond yourself, I think, just by going into the Bitcoin universe.
True.
And it lowers your time preference, like having kids lowers your time preference. So there's some common thread.
Yeah, but I think one of the mistakes, like I've definitely made, I see a lot of people make, is they've been right about Bitcoin either through being smart or being lucky, and then thinking they know everything about everything else.
Oh, for sure.
And I've done that.
For sure.
I'm an expert on everything.
Yeah.
And
everyone with an internet connection today thinks they're an expert on everything.
Yeah. Well, listen, look, I'm going to take you for a Hawksmoor shortly. Anyone listening knows what that is. It's going to be very jealous. I do want to talk to you about fasting before we finish. Can we talk about that?
Okay, let's do it.
Because I see Kung's on a 40-day fast. Russell Kung.
I did not know that. I saw a photo of him that he had lost a ton of weight.
Yeah. Did a 40-day fast.
Was the photo post 40-day fast?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think he's partway through another one.
Wow.
It's like, and how long was yours?
I did 14.
Personally, I think you look better now than when I saw you what were you on, day 11?
You saw me pretty deep into it, day 11 or day 12.
You look drained.
I looked pretty internment camp, I think, as you said.
Oh, man. What did you get out of it?
So I was 235 when I started. So that's 105 kilos, I guess, 106, 7, something like that. And I dropped 25 pounds in 14 days. So I went from 235 to 210, which is 10 to 11 kilos lost.
Damn.
12 kilos lost.
Yeah, but did you need to lose weight?
No, it wasn't for weight loss.
Okay.
So
because I do need to lose weight.
I do it for a couple of things. One, spiritual discipline.
Okay.
Like, I don't know what exactly happens when you're fasting, but your body starts to declutter your thoughts, your emotions. It's said that the energy that goes toward metabolizing food instead goes towards like housekeeping in the body. I think it's called autophagy, where sort of the stronger cells eat the weaker cells. So it's kind of cleaning up all the detritus and whatnot in the body. But it feels like something like that's happening mentally too, emotionally. I just had a lot of baggage from work and personal stuff. And I had done a 9-day fast the year before, and I'd done 3-day fasts several times before that. I do 1-day fast probably once a week.
Oh, wow.
And by fast, it's just water. Like you just drink water and that's it. And electrolytes. So basically salt and water. And so I get the spiritual discipline out of it. I've had this like gut inflammation, autoimmune thing. It's not super severe. It's relatively benign, but I've been trying to kind of deal with that for about 8 years. And so it's helpful with that. And then I guess that's really it. What's the other thing is, I don't know, just the challenge. I just like a challenge. Like I like to kind of set things that are hard to do and like see if I can do them. And
I've done one-day fast.
I've become very infamous recently for ice baths.
Yeah, we try to arrange for a barrel.
That's another one of those things. It's like you go to get into this fucking barrel of ice. Everything in your body is like, fuck you. What? No, like, no. It's sunny. Like, stay out here. It's warm. Feels great. Why would you do this? Everything in your body, all your instincts are saying, no, don't do it. And yet somehow your mind conquers and you just go in and you do it. And you get this like deep meditative state on ice baths, particularly. All the blood rushes out of your extremities, like into your chest. Like you're cold in your neck stem. Like it's awful. You spend 3 to 5 minutes in there. But when you come out, and your body like has this rebound effect, like all the blood comes back out, the endorphins are flowing. Huberman's got a lot of great podcasts on this. There's like spikes in testosterone and growth factor and blah, 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 blah. It's a hormone cascade in a positive way for your body. I like there's something about that, just exercising mind over matter, and fasting is a very extreme way to do that. So the next I would like to try to step it up next. I'd probably go 20 days, 21 days. I'd love to do 40 eventually. There's a reason it's been encoded in wisdom traditions and religions for centuries, right? It's a way, it's a very natural, easy, low cost, like zero cost, actually decreases your cost because you're not eating every day, way to clean up the body, the mind, the spirit. And it's not fun. The hardest thing about it for me was I had to clear my calendar because your energy levels are all over the place. Like one day you're down and out and you just want to lay there and maybe you can't even read a book. You're so out of it. Then all of a sudden you get this spike of energy and you want to write a lot. It's very unpredictable. So I had to do it over kind of Christmas, New Year's, beginning of January so I could have that 2-week gap in my calendar. I would always recommend, though, do it in a warm environment because I did this in Tennessee in the wintertime. I was wearing like 8 layers of clothes and blasting the heat in my house. Your metabolism plummets. So you get very cold, very easy. And you have to be careful breaking the fast is the main thing. Supposedly that's where people can get injured is if you just kind of reintroduce
8 cheeseburgers.
Yeah, if you go straight to a half-pound cheeseburger, it might hurt you a little bit.
How did you break your fast?
There's a book titled The Fasting Cure by a guy named Sinclair. It's available as a free PDF online. Sailor actually recommended that to me. It's a very short read, and it goes through a lot of case studies about people fasting and different things they've healed. I don't want to say it's a panacea, but it solves a lot of things for a lot of people. I broke my fast with a little bit of watermelon. And then I felt fine. So then I had I had bone broth, then watermelon, then I had some eggs. Then I just jumped in and had steak and eggs because like that's the thing I really wanted.
One day fast ever. I was in LA and the only thing that surprised me about it is I woke up the next day and I wasn't hungry. It was weird.
Yeah.
I thought I would be, but it's just not for me. I have been doing this thing called 75 hard.
Oh yeah, you told me.
Yeah, but I broke on day 14. It's you have to train twice a day, but not consecutive. Minimum 45 minutes. One has to be outside. No alcohol, but I've been off alcohol for a month anyway.
And a walk counts, right?
A walk counts,
training?
yeah.
Okay.
A walk counts, which is pretty much all I can do because I can't run because of my back. Gallon of water, read 10 pages of a book, no alcohol, stick to a diet, no cheat meals. And I got to day 14 and I'd only got one workout in and I couldn't fit it in because I had commitments. So I failed because of planning, because if I'd have planned it correctly, I'd have got up at 6 a.m, done one at midday.
Yeah.
I did my one at midday and I just fucked up. So I'm back on it.
So you have to start over.
Yeah, you have to start over. But the really good thing about it is it's just, I think actually failing is a good thing because it's just keeping me in this thing of not drinking, training twice a day, eating well. Like I've lost 9 pounds. And so, and I never lose weight because I'm a fat bastard, just eats all the time. But it's just more of a discipline thing that,
What is the diet you're sticking to?
I'm just doing calorie deficit.
Oh.
So I'm, and what I tend to have is like a brunch, I'll have 4 eggs and salmon. And then for dinner, I'll have like a steak. But if I'm sat there with my kids watching a film and they open a bag of chocolate, I'm not going to say no to a piece of chocolate.
Gotcha.
But I tend to, across my steak and my eggs and my, one coffee a day, I hit about 1,200 calories. And so there's like little leeway if I need it. Or,
have you tried 30 days carnivore?
No, my problem with carnivore, it never actually works for me. So it really triggers people. The healthiest I've ever felt was when I was a vegan. I did 2 years of vegan. And the first years when I wasn't working, I cooked every meal fresh. I was light. I was running. Man, I got my 10K down to 49 minutes. I got my 5K down to 23 and a half minutes. I felt great. My skin was great. I went back to work. I stayed vegan, but because I didn't have the time to make everything fresh, I was having microwave meals and just pastas. And then I went to shit with it.
Right.
I've tried carnivore. Whenever I try carnivore, I feel heavy and bloated.
Interesting.
So it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So it's not for me. But I'm good with like fish and eggs.
Yeah.
Eggs, fish, green salads, I'm really good with.
I think if you do whatever protein works for you, maybe just eggs and fish, even for 30 days, it'll snap that sugar craving. I used to be every week or 10 days, I wanted to eat like a bag of chocolate chip cookies or something, this weird sugar habit. But doing carnivore for 30 plus days, somehow it broke it. Like I'm not interested in bread or sweets anymore.
Yeah, Kung said that. She says drop sugar for 2 weeks and you'll see a massive change in your life.
Yeah.
But I think I don't have a desire to drop. I like watching a movie, having a piece of chocolate.
Yeah.
Get a Toblerone or a bag of Revels or something. I don't have bread. I'm not a bread guy. I don't really eat chips or fries. Yeah. But yeah, the other day my daughter was making avocado and salmon bagels and I had one. Mm-hmm. And it's like, so I'm kind of like, I just want to get into a place where I can eat what I want, but not overeat.
Yeah.
Because I've, put on like 45 pounds since I started this podcast. What was it? No, 3 stone, 14, 28, 42 pounds.
Wow.
3 stone.
Well, I think you could drop it quick. I mean,
yeah. Well, I'll show you my thing. Where is it?
And you could also try the fast if you want. It's,
this is my weight chart since I started. So I'm down from 216 and a half to 208.
Nice.
So I was but me heavier than you when you're that much bigger than me is fucking ridiculous.
I was looking pretty frail and skinny though. Oh, and then I gained all that weight back. Yeah. So 2 weeks from 235 to 210. 4 weeks later, I was back up to 230. And
by the way, what was that weight you were squatting in London?
Deadlifting.
Yeah, on your hex bar.
160 kilos.
Okay.
So 335 maybe.
Jesus. How do your knees cope?
I've been doing it my whole life.
Okay.
I've been doing Olympic lifting since I was 11 years old. So I'm like 26 years in. I love it. It's my drug.
All right, listen, I'm going to take you for a steak. Let's go. This has been great. Where do you want people to go? What is money?
Yeah, whatismoneypodcast.com. Twitter at Breedlove22.
We made a show and didn't argue about anything.
That sucks.
People are going to be really disappointed.
Let's do it over.
Fuck that. All right, man. Good to see you. Let's go.
Thanks, Peter.